So the other question that we have is along kind of the same lines because it's talking about slaves. You've taught before that that one of the reasons Paul was teaching so late into the night when the guy fell out of the window was because the slaves weren't able to show up until after the sun had gone down on Shabbat. And so this person says, what is your original source that shows the Gentiles were slaves to the Romans and were obligated to work 7 days a week? I read in Acts 18:4 that Paul was teaching the Jews and the Gentiles on the Sabbath in the synagogue. Another source I read said the Jews were forbidding the Gentiles from entering into the synagogues because of uncircumcision. I don't know if you said that the Gentiles were slaves.
No, that's in the question, the conflation there of slaves and Gentiles. Not all Gentiles were slaves. There were very wealthy Gentiles. We find even in some of the documents, Roman documents, Greek documents, that there were Gentiles, who were within the Jewish community that were very wealthy. There were Gentiles that gave money to build synagogues and so forth and so on. So there's no question there. But I don't have the original source. In fact, I can tell you where I learned it myself was from one of my professors at seminary when we were doing ancient Near Eastern history, and we were doing history of the first century as well. And he made that statement. But I can say this, that we know that as I said, the majority of slaves worked either in the mines or in the fields. Now, it was just common practice that laborers in the fields labored during the daytime. We have the saying I believe it's of Yeshua in the Gospels, where he says that we work when the time is day, and when night comes, the work is over. And he's using that to refer to eschatological, doing what you must do and can do now, for there's a time when this world is going away and so forth and so on. I'm paraphrasing, obviously. So that would mean that the majority of slaves who were giving room and board in homes would have been, the majority of them would have not necessarily been just household, but they would have been out in the fields. This would mean that they generally worked 7 days a week, from sun up to sundown, and therefore oftentimes their gatherings with the followers of Yeshua, those that had come to faith in the Messiah, would have been in the evenings. Now, can I prove that from documents? I don't have a primary source to prove that, but it does make sense that we do have primary documents that show that the majority of slaves were working in the fields, and that they did work 7 days a week. Tacitus, in his histories, and I can give you this source if somebody wants to, I don't have it here at my desk, but I can give it to you. Tacitus, a historian, makes a jab at the Jewish communities. And let me make an aside here. Remember, those that were following Yeshua, whether they were Jew or Gentile, would have been classed as Jewish or part of the Jewish community because they went to the temple, they kept the Sabbath as much as they could, and so forth and so on. So even the slaves that were Gentiles who were followers of Yeshua would have been viewed by someone like Tacitus, a historian of that period, would have been viewed as amalgamated with the Jews. And he says the Jews are lazy. And why is that? Because they're lazy and they're superstitious. They worship Saturn. How does he say they worship Saturn? Because they take Saturday off. They take the day of Saturn off. They don't work on it. And why are they superstitious? Because they believe that certain sacrifices at their temple, they believe that attending together is somehow empowering to them. And so it would seem to me, therefore, that there was this agape that is spoken about in the Epistle of Jude, the agape feast, which was what? It was a symbolic meal that would put Jew and Gentile together, that would put rich and poor together, that would be free and bound together. And Paul talks about in Galatians 3, right? At the end of Galatians 3, he says, there's neither Jew nor Greek, there's neither male nor female, there's neither bond nor free. Well, where would the bonded people, those who were slaves, where would they gather together with the people of God if indeed, and I do say if indeed, the majority of them were laborers in fields? When would they get together during the agricultural season, to manifest this oneness, it would have had to have been after, when it began to be dark and when they were coming out of the fields, because they were not working during the dark in the fields. And that seems to me to fit the passage there in Acts 20. One more comment on that, and that is there are some who say that he was teaching late on the first day of the week, not after Sabbath. Some think that he was teaching late on Sunday, and Sunday went into midnight, and then he was leaving on Monday. I think the context would say no. He was there. They were fellowshipping at the end of the Sabbath. He continued on for those who were there, and perhaps for those who would come after the sun had set.